Hello, and welcome to Waves of YA, a podcast focused on young adult literacy, brought to you by the Ocean County Library's Teen Literacy Work Group.
Hi, my name is Kristen. I'm one of the librarians at the Ocean County Library.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I'm a YA librarian at the Ocean County Library as well.
And hi, I'm Crystal Maldonado. I am young adult author of Love Stories for Fat Brown Girls, and I'm super excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. We're discussing writing romance with Crystal Maldonado. So let's just jump in. So we're talking about romance. We're talking about your books. How did you first experience writing? The first thing you wrote, what was it about?
Okay. I have a very vivid memory of one of my first stories being something I wrote in the third grade, which I know is very early, but I remember doing some studying for, those state tests that you have to take starting in elementary school. And one of the things we had to learn how to do was essay writing. And for the kid version, we got to do creative writing. And so where there was this prompt that I remember getting so excited about. It was essentially you're leaning up against a tree and all of a sudden you fall backwards, a door opens into the tree and you're like portaled into another world. What happens next?
Wow.
And I loved it. I was like, what? This is so cool. And I was like writing furiously and kept asking for additional paper because I was just like, I have so many ideas for this. And that I remember looking around at my classmates and I was the one who just kept writing. It was like write as long as you can and whatever. And I just kept going and going and I kept thinking of new ideas. And it was one of those things that really stuck with me as this really imaginative opportunity that I hadn't thought of before. I had been really interested in art and creating things that way, but I had never really experienced writing. And so third grade me was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And so that kind of sparked this desire to create and to just try to use my imagination and put words on paper. And then as I got a little bit older, I started to write boy band fan fiction. And so that's where the romance piece of things sort of came in. And I was actually, this is dating myself, but I was part of a writing group during the America Online days, where you would find your friends on there and in chat rooms. And there were these emails that you could trade back and forth, like that were called zines. And so there were fanfic zines. And so basically it was kind of like a magazine through email. And so there were these fan fiction circles for boy bands. And this was how I got my start with writing romance. And I was writing about boy bands.
Any boy band in particular?
Oh, it was always the Backstreet Boys. I'm not going to lie. I have seen them in concert 17 times.
Oh my goodness.
Do you have a favorite?
Honestly, my favorite back then was Nick Carter. I loved just like, oh, he's so cute. And now that I've gotten older, I really have a soft spot for the bad boy AJ and Kevin, the wise older brother of the group. So
yeah, Kevin was always my choice. I think it was the eyebrows. Like his eyebrows really did it, and I was like, Kevin's my guy.
He's got great eyebrows. I will say that for sure.
Yes.
I think that's an amazing prompt. I don't remember ever having a prompt for a test, a writing test, being so really neat to be able to fall back in a tree like that. That was amazing.
It really was. And I don't recall ever having anything as creative as that in that test preparation, honestly, throughout the rest of my high school, middle school career.
Yes.
And this was my third grade teacher. And part of me wonders if this was just her, right? Like, I don't know if it was her magic that she brought to the classroom, because she was just a phenomenal teacher in so many ways. Shout out to Mrs. Centurelli. She always gave us jelly beans when we got questions right.
Yummy.
It's so funny because once my first book published, she actually reached out to me on Facebook and was like, she very sweetly was like, is that my Crystal? The Crystal from third grade? And I was like, oh God. So it was a very lovely, like, full circle moment. Very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have a writing routine when you get ready to start? Is there anything in particular that you have to do before you get going?
I would say before I became a parent, I had more of a routine. And now I feel like I am a chaotic monster, just like a total mess. And I wish I had more of a routine now. But I will say the process of getting ready to start a book has always been kind of the same for me, regardless of what project it is. And the number one thing for me in the early stages of thinking about creating a new story is daydreaming. I think a lot of people, when they think of the writing process, they think, you've got to be at your computer, you've got to have that blank Word document staring you down, and it can feel really intimidating. But before I even get to that part, I feel like I am spending so much time just thinking about these characters, thinking about the world that they live in, thinking about the story I want to tell, and spending time trying to get in the brains of these characters so that they feel like people I know. And then when I do get to the intimidating part of opening that Word document, I have some ideas about them. So I usually go from the daydreaming to kind of like a messy Word document of just feelings and scenes I can picture in my head, character names and qualities about those characters that I want to make sure I incorporate. So for my latest book, The Fall of Whit Rivera, I knew that the main character, Whit, was going to be obsessed with fall and also extremely type A and want everything her way. And so I knew this about her. And so that could influence how I felt like she would deal with certain situations. And then having those things really helps when I'm finally ready to figure out, okay, what is this story I want to tell? How do I want to outline this and do the harder stuff? Yes. For me, that's all the fun, like just the thinking about and oh, what if I did this or what if I did that? That is so much fun for me.
Do you ever write it out or is it always typing?
I often write it out by hand in notebooks, or sometimes it'll just be little Post-it notes. If the mood strikes, I totally will use whatever I have around me, and then sometimes transcribe it.
Okay. Do you carry something with you when you go places?
Always. I always have I have my notebook with me, like a teeny tiny one.
Yes.
And I have a little pen that I keep in my purse, but I also have my phone with me. And sometimes I will use the notes app just to jot down, like, I don't know, for this latest book, I remember I was getting myself a pumpkin spice coffee, as one does. And I was in the parking lot drinking this coffee, and it was raining and it felt so moody and autumn. And I just remember thinking, I want to capture this feeling, like this cozy feeling. And so all I had was my phone. And so I'm just jotting down like rain and moodiness and, pumpkin spice. And those were some of the things I referred to later.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful.
So you sort of hit on it a little, but can you tell us about your upcoming book, which probably by the time this is out will be your current book, The Fall of Whit Rivera?
I would love to. Thank you for asking. So The Fall of Whit Rivera is my third young adult book. It is a rom-com, and like we kind of hinted at, it embodies all of the coziness of autumn, or at least that's what I was trying to do in this book. And it tells the story of Whit Rivera. She's 17. She's entering her senior year of high school, and she's really excited about it, especially because her summer just totally sucked. And so she has been sort of coming off of a summer where her boyfriend moved away and she got a health diagnosis of polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so she's kind of feeling the physical effects of what living with a chronic illness is like. And she's carrying that all around as a secret. And so to her, this start of the new year, which coincides with her favorite parts of fall, is just a new beginning for her. And so we kind of watch as she embraces this senior year, and her goal, the one thing she has in mind, is she wants to make their upcoming homecoming dance, which is called the Fall Fest, the best one ever. And she wants it to be very autumnal and feel like you're stepping into what pumpkin spice flavor tastes like. Like that's her goal. That is kind of what's driving her. And then, of course, nothing goes without a little bit of a problem in YA books. There's always a little something. She gets partnered up with her ex-boyfriend to plan this homecoming dance and event. And she has to figure out how to sort of give and take when she's got a clear vision of what she wants. And she's got this guy who happens to be kind of cute and kind of funny. And she's got to figure out how to work with him.
And kind of super sweet.
So sweet.
Yes, he's so sweet.
And yes, and so she's kind of juggling all of that. And we'll leave it at that. But there is a lot of like romance and family stuff and boy bands. And so there's a little something, I think, for everybody.
So what was the most difficult or the easiest part of writing the story?
Ooh, such a good question. So the easiest part, I think, was writing the romance. I just have so much fun writing those moments between characters that you can feel something building as a reader, but the characters are in total denial, right? They never want to acknowledge that there's any feelings there. And for Whit, she eventually kind of is like, well, yeah, he's cute, but there's these obstacles. And it's like, come on, are they real obstacles, or are you just kind of making this up? So I love getting in there and writing about like the swoony feeling and those like stolen glances. Those are the most fun for me. So that comes, I think, probably easiest because I enjoy it so much. And then I think the toughest parts of writing this book were probably making sure that I depicted the representation in a very nuanced way. That always weighs on me when I'm writing these books, because I want to approach every person and identity in a very caring and open-minded way. And I never want to try to present myself as the arbiter of all knowledge, right? And so Whit is dealing with this chronic illness, like I mentioned, and I also have that same chronic illness. So we both have PCOS. And so I gave her a lot of my own experiences, but I also know that's not universal. And so other people who have this very same syndrome, this PCOS syndrome, they might pick up the book and say, well, I don't have that symptom, or my symptoms present differently. And so I think I was thinking about that a lot as I was writing this, and trying to just make sure that I did it with care. And it was the same thing with Lily. So Whit has a younger sister, Lily, who she's really close with, and she adores her, and she's autistic. And this was also based on my experience with my younger cousin. We grew up in the same house. He also was autistic. So this was our experience. This was kind of what our dynamic was like. I felt like the overprotective older sister. I always wanted to like fight his battles for him. And we see that in Whit. So when I was portraying this, it was deeply personal, but I also wanted to bring care to that. And I think kindness, right? And just say like, this is kind of what I experienced, but it's not necessarily what everyone will experience. So I think that is always hard, because you just hope that intention comes through in the book. Knock on wood.
I think a lot of it did. And I think a lot of it resonated as another person who has polycystic ovarian syndrome. And you're like, you want things to resolve in your books, right? So you read the book and you see these symptoms. And when you leave the book, Whit is still going to have those symptoms or something like them. And so I felt like even if I didn't have all of the same things going on with me as a teenager and now as an adult, as Whit does, it's an accurate representation of a syndrome. It's not just going to disappear. You can't just, working with your doctor, like attack certain symptoms, but nothing is going to go away forever, and nothing's a magic fix. And I think that's the hardest part about a syndrome and something that you live with, like that's chronic. It's always going to be there.
It's there forever. Yeah, that's exactly it. And so I was diagnosed when I was 16, and I felt like at the time, and I don't know if this was your experience too, but I just felt like nobody knew what this was. And I think more people are familiar with it now, for sure. But I still feel like it is this illness that's just kind of like a big question mark. Even doctors are puzzled by it, and it is very confusing. And so in Whit's experience, I wanted to show that frustration and how some days are going to be really good, and it's not even going to feel like this illness affects you at all, which I think is the way of many chronic illnesses. Some days are great and you're like, I feel fine. And then other days you're like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted, or I'm experiencing this one symptom. And it can be tough, especially as a teenager who suddenly is grappling with this amid everything else and all of those other big teen emotions. I think I would have really benefited when I was her age from reading about someone else who was going through something similar to me.
Definitely.
Yeah. And now I feel like now there's more representation on TikTok. So the way that in that summer before her fabulous fall, that Whit pulls back, these things that she is dealing with feel embarrassing, even if they shouldn't be, because that's just what her body is doing. But now with more social media and more people being open about their experiences, you know, for me, the biggest takeaway from this book was like, hey, I was diagnosed when I was 16, which is a lot of years ago. And we are at the same place, I feel like, with new diagnoses and how much doctors know.
I couldn't agree more. And talking about it, I think, is so powerful. Like, it ends up being this thing that connects Whit to the rest of her circle, right? So she goes from carrying this secret all alone, and it isn't until she starts to feel like she can share with other people and talk about this thing she's dealing with that she is able to sort of gain some freedom back and take charge of the narrative too. And if this book can sort of help with that piece of what it's like dealing with a chronic illness, whether it's PCOS or whether it's something else, but I would be so grateful and like so honored if this could just inspire conversations about, I don't know, anxiety, all of those invisible illnesses that we carry around with ourselves that often feel like a moral failing when they are 1000% not. And I just think it's so important to have people around you, like in Whit's case, where you can be honest and you can say, yeah, I'm actually having a really bad day, or I'm having a tough time, and this is why, right? To be able to have those conversations and to just be honest and open about what you're experiencing, I think is really important, and hopefully a message that resonates with readers.
Speaking of, you've mentioned some things that you hope all readers take away. Are there any things that you specifically hope that teen readers take away, not necessarily just about PCOS, but from the whole book?
Yeah, so I feel like when you are a teenager, especially in that senior year, I think a lot of teenagers feel a lot of pressure during that senior year to make it perfect and to do it all, right? And to accomplish everything. And whether they're going to college or they're thinking about trade school, they're on the cusp of what comes next. And we see Whit try to like take control and be like, I can control everything. I can control every facet of my life. And that is not at all what happens. And so I'm hopeful that seeing her be able to sort of let go of the need to control everything is equally freeing to teenagers who are feeling that same pressure, right? I remember being a senior in high school, and there was a fraction, I think, of the pressure that there is now. For all of the good, I think, that the internet does, I think it also amplifies, oh, everyone is getting into such and such college, or they're getting their acceptance letters, or they know what they're going to do after high school. And that is so exhausting. And so I think there's this importance of figuring out what you want to come next. But I also think Whit learned this lesson that there's this joy in being present and in experiencing what's happening now and knowing that you can't control it all. And so I'm hopeful that when teens read this, they sort of feel, they can maybe take a deep breath and feel that levity and feel like, oh, okay, I can take a moment. I can enjoy my homecoming dance. I can enjoy just hanging out with my friends. I can take a moment just for myself and appreciate where I am and not worry so much about making everything perfect. And sometimes I need that reminder too. So
I think we all do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those tuning in before early November, we have a fascinating teen program series throughout the Ocean County Library system. In the program, Ink from Acorns, presenter Debbie Hadley will discuss how Native Americans removed the bitter tannins from harvested foods to make them edible. Teens will learn about this process and leave with their own vial of tannin ink. Catch one of these programs this November at the following locations: Monday, November 6th at 5 p.m. in Waretown. Wednesday, November 8th at 5 p.m. in Long Beach Island. Thursday, November 9th at 3 p.m. in Plumstead. Tuesday, November 14th at 3 p.m. in Little Egg Harbor. Be sure to check out these program offerings and others at your local library this upcoming November.
What are your favorite romance tropes?
Oh my God, I could talk romance tropes all day. So I am a big fan of childhood best friend to lover. I don't know, there's something about just like, oh, they were there all along and they knew each other at all these different stages and now they're finally ready to look at each other in this different way. I just, it's just perfect. That's one of my favorites. Also, I do love a good enemies to lovers. And so that's kind of the trope you get here. You kind of get exes to enemies to lovers, even though I think Whit and Zay are never really enemies. I think they're just playfully angry at each other all the time. But I do enjoy that dynamic where I'm so mad at you. And you're like, yeah, right. You just think the other one is cute. Like, let's be real. But I do really enjoy that. I can go for a good love triangle here and there. Why not? I always love a good one bed trope where there's like, oh no, what are they gonna do? Or like a forced proximity, right? Where it's like they have to be together. You get that with Whit and Zay where they have to have all these meetings together and what are they gonna do? So I just love it. I feel like all tropes can be delightful in their own kind of way. Do you guys have favorites?
I love the enemies to friends. I think that's great.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Such a good one.
Yeah.
I also agree that enemies to lovers is good. And also the forced proximity. This book was great for me because I'm like, oh, I'm thinking of the awkwardness of having to constantly be together and do stuff when you have this weird history.
Yes.
And you've kind of built someone up in your head. I have many nemesises. I don't know if you have in my head. I have many nemesises in my head, or nemesi. I'm not really sure. And seeing that play out with another character, I'm like, oh, like even if they don't even know, you know, they don't know that this is going on. And so seeing them smash together and be like, okay, well, what would happen if I had to work with my nemesis or whatever?
Yes, that is one of my favorites. And I like to think we all secretly have a nemesis, even if it's just for a little thing where it's like, oh, they got in coffee line before I did. And that, I'm so mad at them. I just think that it's fun and funny.
Yes.
Yeah. I also like the introduction. I feel like it's happened with a few books that I've read recently, the boy band stuff. And when that author's fandoms come into their books. Yeah. So like there's a reason that there was a boy band featured, and that has to do with you, right?
Yes. I love that too. I honestly love just hearing people who are passionate about things talk about those things. And so for me, that was totally boy bands coming out in this book. And hopefully you could see that like Whit made this whole little life within her family. Like they loved this boy band who is fake. So the boy band's name, it's Intonation. And, you know, they're a 5-member boy band, which is a callback to the 90s and 2000s when we had kind of boy band mania. And there were the Backstreet Boys, and there were NSYNC, O-Town, 98 Degrees just announced they're reuniting. So there are so many boy bands. And I do love getting a glimpse into just what do authors love and how are they going to like reimagine that in the now when clearly like there were no boy bands reunited when I started writing this. But now we know NSYNC is coming back in 98 Degrees, and I am here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So your novels, not just the Fall of Whit Rivera, but all of your novels deal with acceptance and self-esteem and identity. Can you talk about why those are important features in your books?
Yeah. Like I said, this is my third book now. So the previous two, Fat Chance Charlie Vega and No Filter and Other Lies, they all had very similar main characters in terms of identity. So, like on paper, the main characters are fat, they are Latina, Puerto Rican specifically, they're cisgender women. And yet, all three of them have completely different experiences in their books and different motivations. And I wanted to do that because I just feel like it's so true to life that you can have two people who have the exact same quote unquote identity, right? They check the same boxes, they fall into the same groups, but their experiences are so different. And just because you are similar to someone doesn't mean that your insecurities will be the same. And so I think being able to explore what self-esteem looks like and what I think self-love looks like for all three of these characters has been really important for me, just because I never felt like I got to read books that had characters that shared my identity. So those fat brown women, I would say, were always my defining characteristics. As I got older, I also realized, oh, hey, I'm bi, so let's add queer into the mix. And so like that's part of it too. And so being able to explore those things on my own without really getting to see a character who I felt mirrored those experiences was difficult. And I think that's the same for all of us. Like we just want to see somebody who shares something with us so that we can feel like we're not alone in this journey we call life. And I just think that when we're talking about acceptance and when we're talking about, you know, learning to appreciate who we are, that is such a universal experience across the board. And for me, it's a story that never gets old. I think I am moved every time I get to watch a character grow from somebody who is really insecure about who they are, really nervous about their place in the world. And I get to see them kind of bloom into who they want to be and find their people, you know, and find their place. It makes me emotional to watch the characters grow because that feeling in real life, there is nothing like it. Feeling like you're figuring out who you are, whatever that means for you. For some people, it's finding your fashion identity and like you find it and suddenly you're like, oh my God, this is the missing piece. For some people, it's, oh, I found my queer friends and this is my little family group now. And that is what feels like home. It's such an important narrative. And in the chaos of life, we sometimes forget about how important just ourselves and our own happiness can be. And so I love to be able to explore those journeys and then also to hopefully help validate some of these identities that don't often get to be the star of the show in movies or in TV. And so hopefully in books, it helps to offer that representation that we so desperately need. Beyond wit in this book, some of the side characters and best friends and love interests also have identities that I wish I saw more of, right? So like one of Wit's best friends in the book has type 1 diabetes, and it's just like a brief mention. They're like going in the pool and we talk about how, oh, she took her insulin and took it out before she went in the pool. And I don't think it's even mentioned again, but I think I've tried to include little things like that hopefully help people who experience that see themselves like, oh my God, I also have to take my insulin out when I'm going swimming. Yes. And little things like that can mean so much, especially when you've gone so long without feeling seen or feeling heard.
Yeah, I thought that was really neat. My daughter's been diabetic since she's 4 and she's 28. Oh, really? So when you said that, I was like, oh my God, that was so really neat. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Yeah,
yes.
That's it. Yes. Like, it just feels so good when you're like, oh, yes. We got one. We got some representation. It feels great.
Yes. Yeah, that was wonderful.
And it's more realistic to the world we live in.
Yes.
It's unlikely that every single person you ever encounter has no health issues, is a white person, is cisgendered. All of those things that doesn't happen in our real world, so it shouldn't
Right.
happen in our books, right?
Totally.
Right.
That's exactly it. And we want to build a world that feels bigger than than the ones that we encounter typically in media. And so I think any movement we can make in that front is always a good thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you did a wonderful portrayal
Oh, thank you.
of a mirror, and also a window for us to see the life of a Puerto Rican girl with glasses, a brown female protagonist. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And can I also shout out the curl love? There
Ah,
is
yes.
so much curl
Yes.
love in this book. So if you are listening and you're down on your curls, or you just want
Yes.
some extra love, this book is curl love.
Yes.
So much curl love. And
Yes.
I am like actively, I feel like, fighting against all of those early 2000s movies where the makeover always had the curly haired girl suddenly
Yes.
had straight hair, and they were like, wow, you're so beautiful. It's like, no, our curls can be beautiful too.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. What was your favorite book as a teenager?
Oh, I had so many books that I loved as a teen. I had these two series that were all I could think about. So first of all was the Gossip Girl series. So well before it was a TV show, it was a book series.
Yes.
I gobbled those up. This was before social media and like the internet, really. So I just have these memories of my grandma taking me to Borders bookstore, which
Yes.
does not exist anymore,
Mhm.
sadly, and me like running to the section that had the Gossip Girl
Yes.
books just to see, like, was there a new one? Did they have new covers? And there was at one point the It Girl was an offshoot of Gossip
Yes.
Girl. And so just trying to keep up with those stories, I thought it was just delicious to get this insight into this group of teens who were doing wild things I couldn't even imagine. There was a bit of voyeurism for me, and I just loved it. And then there was this other series that was called Making Waves, and it was by Catherine Applegate, who is so prolific and just incredible. And I stumbled across it truly again at Borders, just by mistake. And it was this story of a girl who she gets an internship over the summer. I think she wants to be like a marine biologist or something. And so she's going to go and she's going to spend the summer working on this internship. And then her bestie joins her unexpectedly. And because of that, they have to scramble to find housing. They get this house, and now all of a sudden there's like all of these teenagers who are also spending the summer with them. And there's this cute boy that the main character knew last summer, and she has a boyfriend, and what are they going to do? And oh my God. And I remember reading both Making Waves and Gossip Girl and just being like, some teenagers have the wildest lives. Like just taking it as gospel, And
Right.
meanwhile, I'm here just like reading my little books, and that was my real life. And I'm thinking these teenagers are off living the high life. But I loved those series. I was also a big Sarah Dessen fan, and just loved to cry at some of those books,
What recent authors have been your favorites to read?
I have so many, but one of my recent faves has been Elise Bryant. She is the author of several books. Happily Ever Afters is One True Loves, and I believe it's called Reggie and Delilah's Year of Falling.
Oh my gosh, I love that one.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Don't be sorry. That's how I feel when I read her books.
Yeah.
She just captures all of the beauty of falling in love.
Yes.
And your reaction, Jennifer, is exactly how I feel every time.
Yes.
Just gasping, like, oh my God, this is so swoony. I'm a huge fan of hers, and I will read anything pretty much that she puts out there. And another favorite of mine is Raquel Vasquez Gilliland. She is the author of Cia Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything, which is a novel in verse. It is breathtakingly beautiful. It includes aliens, but it's really about a girl who is grieving the loss of her mother. And it deals with deportation and identity. But then there's real aliens too. It's fantastic. And she also wrote this book called How Moon Fuentes fell in love with the universe, or how the universe fell in love with Moon Fuentes. Either way, it's about this fat girl who lives in the shadow of her perfect, beautiful sister. And then they go on a tour together. Her sister's an influencer. So they go on an influencer tour, and Moon kind of comes into her own, and she has these magical abilities to read tarot. And it's this gorgeous story. And every time I read one of Raquel's books, I'm like, dang it, why didn't I write that? Because it's perfect.
Yes, I think I read that book. That was a very good book. Yes.
It's lovely. And both of those authors are also just gems. So it's always nice when it's like the book is amazing and then the author is also super sweet and kind.
Yes. Is there a book out there that you wish you had as a teen?
I have two off the top of my head. So one was Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. So it is this fantastic book about a fat Puerto Rican girl, shocker, that she goes on this journey. She's from the East Coast, I believe, and then goes to the West Coast and kind of finds herself. And she's doing like this feminist internship, and she's like, I'm going to learn everything there is about feminism. But she also, of course, learns so much about her abilities and who she is. And she falls in love with this sweet girl and learns to kind of stand on her own for the first time. And I read that book and I just thought, Gabby, how did you do it? How did you capture what I needed? And I loved it so much. And it was a fat character who like appreciated herself, didn't lose weight. And I read that book actually as an adult, and I just was like, oh, how I wish I could go back to teen me and give this to her. And the other one that I just finished is Imogen, obviously, by Becky Albertalli. It is this beautiful story about this sweet girl, Imogen, who believes she is just like the perfect straight ally. She's like, I am just going to be the best straight friend a queer person could want. And she has this weekend with her best college friend, and Imogen, who's still in high school, like gets to spend the weekend with her friend and realizes, oh, maybe I might be bi, and has this whole beautiful love story kind of bloom. And suddenly she's re-looking at her life and she's like, wait a minute, that was me being bi, and that was me being bi. Right. And the way she sort of figured herself out very much mirrored how I figured myself out, except I was in my 30s. And so I'm like, God, if I had this as a teenager, I could have known so much sooner that I too was bi. And so Becky just nailed it with that book. I love it so much.
She often does.
She, like, it's Becky Albertalli, right? Like,
you read the books and it's like she's sitting there telling you this story.
That's exactly it. It feels like Becky's right next to you and telling you what's happening. And you're like, tell me more, because this is so good. Yes.
It just feels very natural. I feel like your books and Becky Albertalli's, Julie Murphy's books, I know that you put a lot of work into them, but they feel effortless. They just feel like you just want to keep going. I think Jennifer said she read The Fall of Whit Rivera in a day and a half. And I'm sure she also like took breaks to like make dinner and things, you know?
I hope you did. I hope you took some water breaks in there too. But thank you. That is truly the best compliment. And Julie and Becky are two of my all-time favorite authors. I just think they capture what it's like to just be human so well in their books. And with Imogen, obviously, I know it was really personal to Becky because she publicly went through this.
Yeah.
Is she queer? Is she not? Is she able to tell these queer stories? And I remember watching that unfold and having these freakouts to my husband at the time, being like, I am writing, at the time I was writing my second book, which was No Filter on Other Lies, and it featured Kat, who is bi and doesn't realize it. And at the time, I didn't realize I was bi. And so I was like, oh my God, am I allowed to write this story? Do I need to start over? And it was through conversations with him and sort of reading about Becky's experience, and also lots of TikToks that kept saying, you are bi, that I was like, okay, the writing is on the wall in this one. And that is what helped me come to the realization that, oh, I'm queer too. And I just so admire Becky and her ability to sort of weather that storm and then to write this beautiful book and be like, here you go, world. Like, this is kind of what it has felt like for me. I just want to give her a big hug because I just think that's incredible.
For those tuning in before early November, we have a fascinating teen program series throughout the Ocean County Library system. In the program, Ink from Acorns, presenter Debbie Hadley will discuss how Native Americans removed the bitter tannins from harvested foods to make them edible. Teens will learn about this process and leave with their own vial of tannin ink. Catch one of these programs this November at the following locations: Monday, November 6th at 5 p.m. in Waretown. Wednesday, November 8th at 5 p.m. in Long Beach Island. Thursday, November 9th at 3 p.m. in Plumstead. Tuesday, November 14th at 3 p.m. in Little Egg Harbor. Be sure to check out these program offerings and others at your local library this upcoming November.
So we're kind of wrapping up here. What's next? Do you have future projects that you can let us know about already?
I do. I would love to share a little more. And then can we talk a little about boy bands a little too?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I have my first middle grade debut coming out next year. You mentioning Julie Murphy is the perfect segue because I co-wrote it with Julie.
She's a great co-writer. I've been reading her adult stuff with Sierra Simone.
Oh, so good.
Co-writing is
she has
like
figured
chef's
it out.
kiss. Yeah.
Yes. She actually approached me last year, I believe, and was like, hey, I'm writing a follow-up to my book, Camp Sylvania, which highly recommend if you haven't read it.
Good. It's so good. And I'll try. I sell it to like the middle grade crowd, and I'm like, listen, she thought she was going to theater camp, and she's going to wellness camp, and some weird stuff's going on at this camp.
Weird stuff's going on. It's amazing. I laughed so much. I felt all the big emotions. And so when she was like, we're going to do a sequel, would you be interested? I was like, Julie, I would follow you to the ends of the earth, whatever you want me to do. So we have that follow-up coming up next summer, and it's going to follow the main character, Maggie, from the first book, as well as her best friend, Nora, which is who I get to write.
I needed more of Nora, so I'm very glad that this is happening.
So they're going back. They're going back to Camp Sylvania, and you get to see what is this new iteration? What does it look like? How are these besties going to deal with supernatural elements being real? And how are they grappling with all of the stuff that happened last summer that was a huge whirlwind? And it was so much fun. Julie Murphy is one of my writing idols and is one of the reasons I became an author. So writing with her was phenomenal. But also to think about this new audience of middle school folks and being able to write that and have more hijinks and little jokes here and there was so fun. So that's next summer. And then following that, I will have another young adult book coming out. We haven't shared the title yet, but I will tell you that it is kind of like a queer brown version of the Britney Spears movie Crossroads, if you are familiar with that. It's loosely based on that and is set in the same world as Whit's world. So you will see Whit again, and you will also see Intonation again. So we'll have more boy band.
That's exciting.
I love it. That's going to be so much fun. When we had you and Lisa Phipps and Julie Murphy, I think it was 2 years ago. Yes. That was a fabulous, if anyone's listening, go back. It was called Everybody Confident. The interactions between all of you were fabulous. So I'm really glad that, yeah,
definitely go back and listen to that. Intent. So they are just phenomenal, and I'm just excited I get to keep writing books and that I get to keep doing this and talking about this and sharing my love of all of the things, not just pumpkin spice, but also the boy bands. And I am slowly going to get people to come on the side of the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and talk about how we used to be rivals back in the day and you could only be a fan of one. Do you guys remember that?
Yes. Yeah, you had to pick. Were you NSYNC or Backstreet Boys? And
can I ask which side you two fell on, or if you were just, no, I'm not doing this boy band thing?
So I was less of a boy band fan, except when I was much younger. I liked New Kids on the Block.
Yes.
So then when we got to the NSYNC Backstreet Boys era, I was more on the Backstreet Boys side, but it really wasn't my genre of music.
Fair.
But if I was picking one and I had to get on a bus for one of them, it would have been the Backstreet Boys.
I would have to say the Backstreet Boys.
The correct decisions, and I promise I did not force them to say that. But same here. I actually loved them so much. I had memorized their favorite colors. I knew their birthday. It was a problem. But I also secretly loved NSYNC. I just loved boy bands, and I just loved that genre of music. I would like secretly buy the NSYNC CDs, but like not tell anybody, because I didn't want to lose credibility with people, and I didn't want to be called a traitor. So that's how intense it was back in the day.
It was very intense.
It really was.
And I feel like now we've all said, wait, we can like all of them.
Yes. I already texted. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
There's so much space in our brains. And I feel like this is why I can't keep track of when I'm supposed to be at work, or like what I need to buy from the grocery store. Because if a song comes on, all the lyrics are still in my head. It's just taking up all of that space. And you're like, well, this is clearly more important to hold on to the lyrics to this.
Exactly. I've already texted a friend of mine who was Team NSYNC back in the day, but we met as adults and we realized, oh my God, we have all these boy bands in common and whatever. She and I went to go see the Backstreet Boys together last summer. And so I texted her and I was like, well, NSYNC is getting back together. If there's a tour, we will be there, right?
Yeah.
And we will be getting, front row tickets if possible. And she said, I will sell my house if I have to.
That's extreme.
Extreme, but dedicated.
I think even more than the music, it's the ability to like wholeheartedly fangirl about something. Even if you don't relate to liking boy bands, it's the idea that you can just get totally into something and who cares what anyone else thinks.
Very true.
That's it.
Yes.
Like, I want to just bottle what you said and just have that come out in every interview I do, because I feel like
I already forgot it because of the
Thank
lyrics.
God we've recorded the podcast. So but that's it. It feels like we've moved into this new era of just celebrating joy and celebrating the things that make us happy. And so that, not to bring it back to the book, but like this idea of pumpkin spice lattes and boy bands, like enjoy what you enjoy and love what you love. And there is no need to be sorry about it. And especially if you're a teen girl, right? Teen girls get all of the hate for the things that they love. And I am so over that. Like, let's uplift teens in general and let them enjoy the things they enjoy, whether they're teens or grown-up teens like the rest of us.
Exactly. Yes. Jennifer, did you want to share who your boy band was?
Oh, she said Backstreet Boys, right?
Oh, she said Backstreet Boys too. You're right.
Yes. Yeah.
So we all picked Backstreet Boys. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're solid on that. Good.
We are.
So I think we can close up here. I want to thank you so much for coming and talking to us again. You're a wonderful person to interview because it just leads in different directions than we knew we were going.
Yes,
thank you,
Crystal. This was a pleasure. It was very nice meeting you. And
I have a blast every time you have me back. So I hope this is just us forever coming back and talking about all things books and boy bands and pumpkin spice lattes and whatever else we feel like.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much and have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to check out the Ocean County Library's website for more podcasts and events. All titles mentioned in today's episode can be found through the Ocean County Library, free with your library card. Until next time, happy reading.